welcome back, Latino community.
Bienvenidos. Thanks for tuning in.
So today we are going to be talking about a very common topic called depression.
Yeah, we decided to talk about it because, at least for me, I don't know for you, I've noticed that, a lot of people still don't really understand depression. There's definitely this stigma, and
Right.
I think this image of what depression is, and while it is that image, it's so many other things.
Right. And there is that stigma in our community, right? Of we don't really understand it, like you said, so we kind of dismiss it.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is so scary that you don't want to talk about it.
Exactly. So, what do you think depression is, and what does it look like?
So I think depression looks like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Some people wear it really well.
Yep.
Some people still socialize and they still go to work and they're very functional.
Mm-hmm.
But inside, there's something
Right.
missing.
Yeah, and so functional depression is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is when people still go to work, they still do their responsibilities, they get up from bed, they kind of keep things rolling. But
They're like on
yes,
autopilot.
On autopilot, but inside, maybe happiness is not there. Maybe there's a lot of sadness and they don't know why.
Right.
Maybe frustration, maybe hopelessness, maybe low motivation.
Right. That's what I was thinking. Lack of motivation, tiredness.
Yes.
Although you force yourself to get up,
Right?
still feeling tired, just low energy.
Yep.
You don't want to do things that you normally would want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you do it because you have
Yes.
to, but
Because you have to. Another one that I was thinking was maybe low self-esteem or pessimistic thoughts about the future, not feeling
Right.
good about yourself, where you're at. So it is more than just sadness.
right. What's the typical depression that you see, that you think, or people think that is out
Yeah. So what I hear, from sessions and clients, people think that depression only is staying in your bed all day, sleeping all day, not getting up, not showering, completely rock bottom. And that is what usually people think depression is. Now, it can look that way, but it's not the only way depression looks. And I think that's what confuses people and makes people say, I'm not depressed.
Right.
What are you talking about? No, I'm just sad, or I'm just going through a rough time. I'm not depressed.
there. Right. There's nothing wrong with me.
There's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah, there's only something wrong with that stereotypical movie depiction of depression.
Yeah.
Of dark windows and in bed, like you said.
Right. Very gloomy.
So we definitely do want to normalize it, right? Normalize that a lot of us may have depression, may see somebody with depression and not really acknowledge or understand it. So kind of giving people the tools and letting them know, like, these are the different types.
Yeah.
And what kind of help do you think that at every level people should go and find, or what kind of support do you think that they need to get, right?
Yeah. I think it depends, right? And so we did want to spread more information about basically what the diagnosis book will say about depression. And so there's a mild version, there's a moderate version, and there's a severe version. And so I think, if I'm correct, there's about 7 to 9 symptoms that you can have in depression. And if it's 2 to 3, it's mild. If it's, 3 to 5, it's moderate, and then anything above, it's severe.
Right.
And so it doesn't really, take too long to be a diagnostic. I believe it's 2 weeks that someone has to experience a lot of sadness with these symptoms too.
Right, there's definitely a duration, right? So if you feel some of these symptoms, like lack motivation, lack of energy, sadness, for a day or two, it's probably not going to be diagnosed as an official depression.
Right. It's sadness.
Right. So anything that lingers more than 2 weeks, that's probably when we start getting a little bit more concerned and probably pay attention to it.
Yeah.
There's also another element that I just thought about when we're talking about duration. There is menopausal depression.
Yes, I was
Right?
thinking about that, about DS and then postpartum
Yes.
and grieving.
Right.
There's so many reasons why, depression could happen.
Right. So, so a lot of the times I get clients that will come from a clinic and they said, well, I scored that I have depression, so here I am. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah.
And for me, I kind of see it as an exploration of, okay, well, you answered these questions a certain way that indicates to us that you're not feeling your best. So let's start to figure out what it is and how we can get you better.
Yeah.
And then little by little, when we start hearing the stories or we start talking about the environment, we start talking about the household, then it makes sense a lot of the times why this depression shows up or it's just lingering. Something that you and I were talking about, and this in the field, there's controversy or there's like difference in opinions, right, of where does depression come from?
Right.
And for me, personally, I think that there are different types of depression. Some of them can be chemical imbalances. There could be hormone imbalances. I think a lot of, not a lot of it, but there's a certain element of it that is also nutrition based.
Got it. Yeah.
And then of course our field, it's the environment.
Correct.
What is going on in your home or in your work or in your school?
In your life.
That is in your life, yes,
Mm-hmm.
especially relationships.
Yeah.
That is causing you such despair or discomfort.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot, in our work, and it's a lot of people that don't even realize that we're experiencing some sort of depression because of their home life. I work a lot with young adults, and they tell me about childhood and the things they went through and their family went through with their parents and their siblings. And then it starts making sense, like, whoa, like you went through a lot and you were really sad about it. And then you were struggling with, self-esteem and believing in yourself, and your grades were affected, and it was hard to concentrate, and you didn't have much hope, and you were really bothered about how your relationships looked. And I think that's why it's so important to bring awareness to this, because that does affect someone's mood and if they would be depressed.
Yeah, it definitely has so much to do with the environment. And as you're talking about like childhood, I'm thinking sometimes we're so accustomed to a certain life and certain surroundings that we don't even see it as abnormal, right? We're in constant threat or hypervigilance that we don't even see that as, we don't understand the contrast of what a peaceful environment is, because we haven't been exposed to it yet. So in therapy, a lot of it is us kind of imagining that, right? Like, well, what else is there? What would be best? And it reminds me of like a houseplant. And I have to tell you the story of, I went to Singapore, and I don't know if you see these indoor houseplants that are a tree with like the beautiful green leaves.
Yeah.
You see them like in IKEA and like all these. So turns out that those cute little houseplants can actually be a humongous tree.
Wow.
When I went to Singapore, I was walking down the street and I was like, no way, that's not real. It was as big as an oak tree.
Oh my God.
That's how big it was. And I was just thought, oh my gosh, and we treat these little plants
Oh my God.
like they are not able to grow anymore. And they're just, for me, for sure, I kill these plants, right? So I overwater them, I don't give them enough sunshine. They're probably not in a good like air environment, right? So these little plants will never know that they were meant for a big tree life.
Yeah.
So I think of like some people that grow up as a house plant that maybe are overwatered or not watered enough or not given sunshine. They'll never know the possibilities until maybe they see, oh, there's an outdoor.
Yeah.
There's like life outside in a garden.
And they start watering themselves.
And they start watering themselves, or they're in an environment where it rains occasionally and then there's sun occasionally, and you're like, oh, this is what thriving is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought about that tree. I was like, oh.
That's a really good example, and I think even analogy, because and back to your point of they don't even realize it. It's normal to them until you start, processing that and deconstructing that. And it's really special when they get to the point of, oh no, that wasn't normal, huh?
Right.
It's like, no, and they kind of start seeing, oh, okay, how do I change my environment so I can grow?
Right. There's sometimes a little element of I deserve better because I know that there is better.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times that little window is what gets people out of the depression because then it gives hope.
Right.
Which that is, hopelessness is a huge symptom for depression, right? You feel hopeless. You feel like the future doesn't hold anything for you. So why even try?
Yeah. I did want to also mention, because I also notice sometimes people think there has to be a reason. And so, yes, sometimes depression has a reason, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's what's so confusing, I think, about depression, especially for people to grasp. I hear people talk and say, well, nothing happened to me. I had an okay childhood. I like my job. I'm in a good marriage. I have good, income.
Right.
And so they're really confused about, why am I depressed? And so they start to maybe minimize the depression, not validate it, tell themselves that, no, this can't be, because on paper my life is great. My life is good.
I've checked off all the boxes.
And so I do think it's important to say that sometimes there's not a reason. And even if that's really hard to understand, it's really important to validate the feeling. So validate, maybe I am really sad. Maybe I don't know why, but I am sad. I am struggling with motivation. I don't have a sense of hope. And again, not really focusing on the why if you don't have it, and just processing, well, this is what's happening, what's going on, and how can I help myself?
Right. Where can I start to grasp at something better?
Yeah.
Or different. We don't know about better yet, right?
Exactly.
But something different.
Yeah.
There's also the part where in our community, like especially traditional parents, the way that we're supposed to cope with it is just get over it. Right? Just no.
Or pray.
Pray. You can pray yourself out of it.
Yep.
You're not strong enough. I don't have crazy kids, so get up and do it anyway.
Or it's gonna be okay. Just keep being positive and thinking good things won't happen.
Depression didn't exist in my day.
Yeah.
Right?
It'll pass.
It'll pass. Yeah. So what do you do when you hear that from your elders, your relatives?
Yeah.
They're just like, it doesn't make sense. You're making this up.
I think a lot of the solution is just don't tell them. I've had a lot of people that, say, well, my family member is not really trustworthy because they won't believe me. And I think it's a lot of hard conversations. Sometimes it's, I know this is what you believe, but I'm telling you I'm really sad, or I'm telling you this is what's going on with me. And I think understanding that maybe the parent or the family member will get it, maybe they won't. But practicing that almost validation of, hey, this is what's going on. You may not agree with me, but this is what's happening. And I think just being really careful that you are listening, that you are understanding and showing that empathy even if you don't really quite understand it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. If you're on the receiving end of hearing this news, right, it's kind of, it's not necessary for you to understand it.
Yeah.
It was interesting that you said sometimes don't say it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell your parents if you know that they're not going to be supportive, or tias, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that because when you're in a state of depression, you need support.
Right.
You need people to lift you up. You need that tribe that is going to come together and wish and hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
So to have people that are not going to validate you or not support you or try to bring you out of it, but instead damage you and push you down or just ignore it, it can do way more damage than helpful, even if they have the title as mom or dad or tia, you know?
For sure.
So I totally see that.
But that, I think, brings the importance of then finding the people that you can talk to, right? Because I think also on the other side of it, it's also not helpful to not say anything at all.
Right.
And so, yes, maybe it means being maybe
selective
on who you tell, but knowing who you can talk to, who you can share this with. Because, you know, if it's just stays bottled in, which most cases are, there's going to be a lot of damage that way too. Right. There's going to be years of bottling and not processing and not saying aloud, and then you know, it happens. People explode.
Yeah,
you know, one day it comes out in different ways, and then there's going to be a lot of processing, a lot of work when it comes out that way.
Right. Yeah, it's so important for people to find support.
Yeah.
Whether it is through faith, right? Through people that are close to you, through friends, through therapists. Or if you need like some of your kin, like a sibling that you can trust or a cousin that you can trust, you know, but make sure that those people are very careful with your depression as much as you are.
Yeah.
Right? I could see that.
And that validation is so important, and I really do hope that, you know, my wish is that everyone would get validated or whatever they need to be validated with. But I've noticed even when the power of just meeting someone where they're at and the power of validation and going at their pace, you know, I've had so many people that say I'm not depressed, and I don't fight them. You know, the clinical side of me kind of knows I would disagree, but they're not there yet. And so we explore it. Okay, then what is it? You know, we don't have to label it depression.
Right.
You know, what is it? What's going on? And when, you know, they're met with their ad, they have this empathy and this validation of like, man, that sucks. Whatever you want to call it, but it sucks.
Right.
You know, there's a day that comes that kind of says, you know, I think I am depressed. And I think it's the power of, I think, just accepting it and saying, yeah, this is what it is. I think sometimes it's really hard for people to get there, and which is totally fine.
Right.
But I think getting there will be really helpful, because I think that's where the work starts.
I was going to ask you, what do you think the benefit of labeling it is? Where does it come from?
I think it's accepting something is going on.
Right, okay.
And it's almost like unmasking it, and you know what you're dealing with.
Right.
And then
voila, there's resources.
And you're like, okay, there's this thing that exists. I'm not going to be in denial anymore. Let's work on it.
Right.
You know, it's almost like this elephant in the room, like everything else gets talked about except that, and then the elephant finally gets discovered.
Right.
It's almost freeing. It's like, okay, I'm not hiding anymore. We're calling it what it is, and we're gonna start working on it.
And you know what's interesting too? It's like about labels and like what do you want to call it? I kind of make the depression like a character for people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, what does yours look like? You know, like, does it come every day? Does is it big? Is it little? Is it pushy? You know, does it just linger? Is it like annoying that it's just like, no, we're gonna be sad today, or is it like an angry, just,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, acknowledging that there's that piece of you that's called depression or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But the more we study it, the more we know what yours looks like, then that's when we can start dismantling it.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I think, a really important of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But like getting there, right? And I
Mhm.
think some people, it's hard for them to get there, and I think that's why this video is so important, because it's not normalized for them.
Right.
Right. Depression is for crazy people. Depression, it's rare. Depression is only if you're in bed all day.
Right. And then maybe depression needs medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're anti-medicine sometimes,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So we don't want to go see a doctor to give us pills because there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with me.
Right. Or my family won't ever believe me that I have depression, so
Mhm.
let's just push through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's interesting. Like, I don't know how many people know that depression doesn't have to be treated with just medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a part of it,
Mhm.
but that's not necessary a lot of the times. And talk therapy does wonders too,
Mhm.
right? To just uncover what it is and how to get it
Yeah.
out of your life.
And there's such empowerment if the person can decide however they want to treat it.
Mhm.
Whether it's medication, therapy, a combination of both,
Mhm.
faith, support systems, books.
Right.
There's so many things that someone can do to help themselves, as long as they feel like it is working for them.
Right. As long as they acknowledge it, like you
Uh-huh.
said. Yeah. The other thing that, as you're talking about validation of depression, it is so refreshing to have a friend that is just like, you know what? Yeah, that's awful. It sounds awful.
Yes.
Instead of like, how are we gonna fix it?
Uh-huh.
What if you do this? What if you work out? What if you
Right.
eat better? What if
Yes.
you sleep more?
Uh-huh.
And it's like, no, I'm depressed. There's depression here, but I'm telling you because I don't need you to fix it. I'm just wanting to be heard. And it is so refreshing when you finally get
Yes.
to have somebody that is just there, just
Mhm.
listening.
Mhm.
Which hopefully a lot of therapists would be the same.
Yeah,
When that
I've
brings-
noticed
yeah.
a lot with family members or parents.
Mm-hmm.
It breaks their heart seeing their significant other or their daughter or their son be sad, and
Mhm.
all they want to do is fix it and take it away.
Right.
And so, I tell, if it's a family therapy session or a couple session, I tell the other person, I know you think you're helping, but you're not.
Right.
And let's meet them where they're at and tell them and make them feel that we're here.
Right.
We're not trying to take them out. We're here in this together, and we're going to explore it and learn more about it. We're not
Right.
going to pressure this person. We're not going to invalidate it or silver line it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, at least, there's no at least right now. That's hard, and I don't know what that feels like. I'm
Right.
sorry that you're going through this.
Yeah, and that's like the best
Yeah.
little piece of water in the desert.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else that is coming up for you during our conversation? Anything? I'm thinking of, especially speaking of family therapy, right?
Mhm.
Just having teens that go through this
Mhm.
depression.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people are talking about it nowadays,
Yeah.
so it's not as stigmatized
Right.
within teenagers, but maybe it's not understood.
I think it's a hard thing to understand, because like we talked, there's a lot of people still with that definition of depression is just sadness,
Mhm.
like a very a sadness to the point where they're in bed all day.
Mm-hmm.
Something I hear parents say a lot, but they go out with friends. They don't do this, but they're going out with friends, so how
Mhm.
depressed can they be?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not all or nothing, black and white. Depression lingers sometimes. Depression is really bad one day, maybe the next day is not so bad. and maybe friends are an escape.
Right.
That's maybe the only thing that they can do or they have the energy to do. So I would maybe encourage people to not really see it that way. But you do this, so how depressed can you be?
Right.
You know, I think be more curious with it. You know, well, what is depression for you? What are you feeling? What makes seeing friends easier, but not doing this so much? How can I help?
Right. And I think that's the best question to kind of wrap that up, because you think, okay, yes, I want to validate, I want to honor you, I want to be curious, but you're also seeing your family member suffer. And do you really continue to go through the days and being in the same home with somebody that you see that's suffering, right?
Yeah.
Or at least you know, maybe you don't see it like we're talking about
Got
it.
it.
But you know, so it's like almost this feeling of hopelessness that you can't help as much. But yeah, I think that asking, how can I help? Just even the thought that you're there,
Yeah.
that you're willing, that you're open, but not offering that solution, I think that's great.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, like maybe the biggest message is knowing the different phases of depression. That it looks different ways. It's not just this one thing that we see in the movies or TV shows. It has so many faces, and I think understanding those different kinds and how it looks and how it may look different in different people and different kids, teenagers.
Right.
And I think seeing it through that perspective instead of it is this one thing, you're not displaying all of this, so you're not depressed.
Right. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, because we see, you know, people smiling and having a great time, and they're hurting inside.
Yeah, I just think about all the mamas out there, right? You're just exhausted and probably dealing, like you said, postpartum depression, but you're in survival mode. So, yeah, for sure, reach out.
Yes, the appearance is probably way different from the inside.
Yeah.
And so knowing the inside, right, not just what it appears like.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so if anybody I know, reaching out and staying connected to people, checking in on people is so important, especially nowadays. A quick text, a quick call, like, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? You know, it could be so transformative for that depression.
Right, and not just say, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? Tell me.
Right.
You know, what's going on, not the small talk. How are you? Good.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
So you know.
Just make sure that you're open and just making yourself check in and available to others. You never know who may need it.
Right. Well, let us know if you have any questions about depression and what it may look like. We're happy to answer any of them to help, you know, guide your understanding of it.
Yeah, if you need any other resources, let us know. We're always a comment, a DM away.